same thing, but you also have to take and consider that the third shift from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. the next day, and also the 1 a.m. shift, because people were leaving at 2 a.m. and 1 a.m. They wouldn't stay until 5 a.m. because we're less people volunteering because they're weeding off. That the table was guarded less, and we have less people, so there's more opportunity for theft. Does that help a little bit?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Camilleri.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if what you're saying about the tabulation of ballots is true, and that some of these ballots were counted multiple times, why is it that there are not more ballots than those who are tabulated in our poll book?
I do not know how your system works. I do not. One thing I know is there were several ballots that were not in the poll book or in the system, and they were being entered manually. So how are you finally taking a tally of it? I do not know that. All I'm here to tell is what I witnessed. I do not know, end of the day, have you put all of this data together and have you come up with a number? And if it's tallied like a balance sheet, great. I don't think we would be here if that tallied. My best guess is it did not. So that's why we are going through all this.
So what I'm saying is that, in total, the registered number of voters in Detroit is about 500,000 around. The total ballots cast was around 250,000.
Okay.
And so we don't see multiples here, and many other people have alleged that there were far more people who voted than those who live in the city of Detroit, and that just does not add up. It just
Thank
doesn't
you,
add up.
Representative.
That was not part of my testimony.
I know.
I think you asked the question, and she said she wasn't familiar.
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. With that, I think we appreciate it. I did want to ask you though, do you have any? I mean, both of you have been there on the front lines. You've been there in the TCF Center. You've talked today about what you've witnessed. Do you have any suggestions for us as legislators on policies or things that we should look at in terms of how do we prevent some of these things from happening to people like you again in the future? Have you put any thought into that? Like if you were to see new laws or things that need to be looked at in terms of preventing in the next election some of these things from happening at the TCF Center?
I would give you my perspective as being an outsider. I come from a country where a lot of things go wrong. Our countries are known for corruption. But when it comes to elections, there is, from what I've seen here to what we used to do back in India, it is a lot more organized now because we have an identification system. And the fact that now, as the other representative said, that you can actually show up and vote without an ID, it's shocking. How can you allow that to happen? Like, a lot of people think all Indians look alike. I think all Chinese look alike. So how would you tell? If some Chow shows up, you can be anybody and you can vote. And if somebody with my name, you can't even tell my name. Anybody can vote on my behalf. So ID should be the basic requirement.
Please, let's let her testify, everyone. We want to allow the witnesses to speak. Thank you.
ID should be the basic thing, and there should be a cutoff date as to when you can request the mail-in ballots. It can't be like you can show up the same day and request it and give it the same day. The whole purpose of the ballot is defeated. I think you can put a lot of measures, maybe put policies that this does not get repeated, because, and again, the fact that there was not a Republican present on every counting board, that was also a shocker. A lot of people I know from my own church, they wanted to work as a poll worker, but they were told that the positions were full, so they don't need any more Republicans. If only there was a Republican present at every table, maybe a lot of this would have been avoided. And also, I think, that the whole vitriol of the entire poll workers that were there, that to me was the shocking thing. I would expect a lot more respect. These are all fellow Americans. If it was towards an immigrant like me, at least maybe it's understandable, but these are all fellow Americans. Why would you hate them just because of their political affiliation? Maybe that could change. We're talking a lot about hate, BLM and everything. How about we also just extend it to, the white males or, whoever is being also treated very, that's discrimination what I notice. And this is an outsider perspective.
Do you want to answer the question? Do you have any suggestions for
I'll
us?
be brief. I
Yep.
mean, simply, we just can't let it happen. The way we do it is up to you, and that can change. You have to think about law changes over time, and it's going to continue changing for the next thousands of years. But we simply can't let this happen, because if we don't let this happen, then reality will change for the next thousands of years. So I would suggest maybe better enforcement immediately after the election, because clearly we're now heading into December. We don't want to cut it this close. We need, in the short term, a body that can say the day after the election or 2 days after the election, there's 20,000 dead voters, wipe them out immediately. And this should be apolitical, not political. They're just clearly dead. Have the database enforce it. Why are dead voters still now? They're certified now. And I'm not trying to make a political statement, but we certified that knowingly.
Thank you. Well, I know you both are very brave coming here today, and I understand it's shocking the things that you've said today about what you've witnessed at the TCF Center. So thank you both for your testimony. We appreciate it. And now, Mr. Giuliani, I think we'll move on to the Colonel here. It's all right. So Colonel Phil Waldron is here. Please, when you're ready, Mr. Waldron, can you explain why you're here, what your background is, your expertise, and when you're ready, please begin.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to look at some statistical analysis. I worked with a team that's been looking at the voter manipulation, election manipulation since November of 18. I started looking at this issue in August of this year. Doing a deep dive on several key areas with some of the electronic voting machine companies. And we started looking at some of the vulnerabilities that have been mentioned on the floor of the U.S. Congress and Senate that have been widely published in, publicly available documentaries. So we began looking at the problems immediately after the election, doing analysis on anomalies in the data. And then we also did some forensics on a couple of locations up in northern Michigan in Central Lake Township and Antrim, and then talked to folks at Star Township. And all this information is in affidavits as well, sworn affidavits. In a nutshell, we began to look at anomalies in the voting systems. We looked at publicly available information from your state. First thing we noticed was that there are 643 precincts in Michigan with a voter turnout above 80%, which is a little bit anomalous. There were 21 precincts that were over 90%. 10 precincts that had exactly 100% voter turnout, and 6 precincts that were over 120% voter turnout. So as we began to look at that, my team focused on anomalous patterns where votes were entered in an amount of time that was physically impossible for the tabulation machines to process the votes. And so we found four spikes in the analysis that exceeded the tabulation machine's ability to process that amount of votes in a timeline. And that was in Kent County, Macomb County, Oakland County, and Wayne County. And again, this data was from Dominion and published, in open source. So those anomalies pointed us to a couple other things that some of your previous witnesses who I just heard tonight, but the incremental absentee vote punches were there was a big move from 6:52 on the morning of the 4th. 16,000 absentee votes were processed. Between 6:52 and 7:49 local time on the 4th, an additional 213,429 absentee votes were processed. And this aligns with some of the observations that the previous witnesses made. And then at 11:15 at a time, 11:15 that same morning, in a time period of about 8 minutes, which correlates to the time our previous witness, Miss Jessie, testified. There was 56,098 votes processed in an 8-minute period. Now, each one of these machines can process about 20,000 votes an hour. So you can do the math yourself, or it's in our affidavit. So the anomalous activity led us to believe that just looking at the data, that there were red flags for fraudulent activities. And we have subsequently asked for our team or someone else to do the forensic analysis to determine exactly what happened with those votes and those spikes that could not have been mathematically processed with the amount of machines that were present in the facilities. Our team also went up to northern Michigan to the Central Lake Township. We do have an affidavit from Miss Judith Koslowski. While we were up there, she had a tabulation or retabulation, and showed a pretty significant amount of change in the votes. We published an affidavit with those key elements that showed differences in the data runs and the tapes, and I believe I've provided that to you as well. And then a declaration by Robert Marsh, the Star Township supervisor. A couple of the excerpts. When he said, upon examining the tape at the close of the polls, I could see that President Trump had clearly won the presidential race in Star Township. He said, I believe the numbers were 462 for President Trump, with Joe Biden receiving 161 votes. Normally, when a candidate has such a large lead, it's safe to assume who the winner would be. Early the next morning, my wife received a phone call from a friend asking what happened to Antrim County going blue, meaning Democrat. At 7:36 that morning, I was texting our stats representative, Tristan Cole, to find out if those were the actual results. At the time, Tristan advised me that the numbers were not right, that Antrim County was reporting 462 votes had been credited to Joe Biden, and President Trump had only received 10 votes. So we saw numerous examples of numbers moving, numbers being flipped and switched. As you realize, the Antrim County is where the 6,000 vote glitch occurred. And if you look at the numerous references in the guidelines for elections in the Help America Vote Act, the Federal Election Commission Voting System Standards, and the Federal Information Security Modernization Act, an error rate is permissible for 1 out of 125,000 ballots. And if you look at just what happened in Antrim County, the error rate was 8.3. So it puts it about 750 times the allowable limit. And according to the regulations, that should have disqualified. They went later and changed that from a glitch to a clerical error, which, they kind of changed up the reporting on that a little bit. In a nutshell, we found several other things using open source data. There is a gentleman named Eric Lutzen, and he has matched up a list. He started looking at voters above the age of 80 that were registered for voting and did vote in Michigan, and 17,327 Michigan voters also had a corresponding obituary. And I didn't print that whole thing out, but I can give you that website for the tabular data. And it's about 350 pages or so. So in the essence of time, I'll close it out. We'd be happy to chat if there's any other specific information that I can provide to you about our findings.
Sure. Thank you. So I just want to understand, I mean, I think, we, was there something you were going to add?
I was going to ask him to spend a few minutes on Dominion
Okay.
Company. He knows quite a bit about it, and he's one of the few people that has examined their machine.
Okay. Well, let me ask my question, and then we'll ask you about Dominion too. But I just want to understand. So we had the Antrim County Clerk in here, and we had her testify earlier this, in the last few weeks. And one thing that I found from her testimony is that she seemed not to be very well trained. Her clerks locally did not seem to be very well trained, and they basically they didn't seem to know how to work their machines. They didn't seem to run the proper tests from the testimony that would have discovered the mistakes. And then when the election happened, and we saw this 6,000 votes that went for Biden, and Congressman Bergman found that and reported it, and then they looked at it, and they said, "What happened here?" And she said it was a technical glitch or whatever she said. Well, that came from her office, and now a few days later or whatever it was, she alleged it was human error, and that's what she said later. So based on that, I mean, what we have to go on in this committee is the testimony we've heard. And based on what she said, that looked like it was human error. If we go off what she said that the tape matched. She said this would have been discovered in a canvas because the tape matched. So I just wanted to hear if you have knowledge of this, if there's anything you can speak to on this, because that was the conclusion that I had come to after hearing her, that this was limited to Antrim County. And again, like I said, Dominion won't come in, so I don't know more, but I know in Antrim County, it sure seemed like the clerk there didn't know what she was doing, and that caused a lot of this problem and confusion. So can you tell us more about what you learned and address that for me? Thank you.
Yes, our forensics team went up to the Central Lake Township.
And can you clarify, is that in Antrim County?
It is in Antrim County.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
and this was included in the forensics report on Central Lake Township in Antrim, Michigan. The report date was November 29th, 2020. And on the 27th, the ASOG forensics team, which is Allied Security Operations Group forensics team, visited the Central Lake Township in Michigan. The clerk presented to two separate paper totals tape from the tabulator with the identification number ID2, tabulator ID2. One was dated poll opened November 3rd, 06/38/48, which was roll one. And the second dated poll open November 6, 2020, 09/21/58, which was roll two. She was asked, Ms. Kozlowski.
I ask you, what does that mean? So was one, what were the two dates?
The
There were two
actual poll
tapes?
date, November 3rd, and then the second on November 6th.
And there were two tapes.
Two tapes. They ran the ballots and printed roll two. She was asked by the county clerk's office to come in and do a retabulation on the 6th.
Okay, so there was a one run through and a ticket printed, and we went through that with the clerk. There's a ticket that shows the result
Correct. And
on
then a
November 3rd on
retabulation.
election day,
Then a retabulation.
on November 6th.
Correct.
And you're saying that was ordered by the county clerk?
By the county clerk's office. She said she was notified by Connie Wing of the county clerk's office and asked to bring the tabulator and ballots to the county clerk's office for retabulation.
Okay, so what did you find when you looked at that?
They ran, roll one had a total of 1,494 total votes. Roll two had 1,491 votes. They had three less ballots because 3 ballots were damaged in the retabulation process. So Ms. Kozlowski said that she and her assistant manually refilled out the 3 ballots, curing them and ran them through a ballot counting system. But the final numbers did not reflect the inclusion of those 3 ballots. So the shifts in the votes from tape 1 or roll 1 to roll 2 on election night, President Trump received 566 votes. Vice President Biden received 340 votes. On the recount, Trump had 1 less vote at 565, while Biden was unchanged at 340. The other areas on the down ballot where we saw a lot of different number shift was a proposed ordinance to authorize marijuana, and then a retail establishment within the village of Central Lake. So those were the ballot proposal to authorize marijuana went from not passing to passing by shifting votes and removing when the recount, the 3 ballots were not counted, the proposal passed with 1 vote. And then for school board, even though this was a ranked voting, the top 2 apparently were going to be elected. There was a significant number of votes. There were 742 votes added to this total. Between the election, there were 1,068 votes. And then on the recount, there were 1,810 votes that showed 112 write-in candidates. The school board member shifts were significant, as well as there was a change in the state proposal 20-1. There was a change in those numbers. So the way that works, the township clerk was given 2 compact flashcards as a security key. One of the compact flashcards is known as the ISD card. So it goes into the administrator slot. And then the CF card goes into the poll worker slot. And then there's a security key that's used on the security key. So Ms. Kozlowski was given the cards that were in proper retention and reran the tapes. The difference in the administrator card, which is the software load, the poll numbers were pretty much the same, but votes in between those 2 runs shifted. So there's a discrepancy in the forensics.
How did you find that?
The discrepancies?
Huh?
In the actual tapes, in the
Is that
tabulation
one
tapes.
machine?
One machine, yes.
It made that many mistakes?
They made a lot of mistakes.
Did it do anything right?
It kept pretty close to the other votes, but it did not meet with the standards of the
Pretty
Federal
typical of a
Federal
Dominion
Election
machine?
Commission. We have not examined forensically in this election more than this machine. It's pretty much been blocked.
So
It definitely is far outside the limits of the 1 in 250,000 vote error rate.
So
Based
just
on that, would you want to examine more machines?
Yes, sir.
just to understand, so what the clerk has said is that, and I heard you say there were 2 tapes, and then you kind of went through how there were some differences on the 2 tapes. What the clerk has said is that there was a problem basically with the way the count was displayed on the website, but that when they looked at the tape, that the count was accurate, and that would have been caught in the canvas. Do you agree with that, or do you disagree?
So the votes were canvassed on election night, according to Ms. Kozlowski, and approved. And for some reason that she did not know, she was asked to come back in to redo. She says on this is the declaration of Ms. Judith L. Kozlowski, and it's signed and dated. And this declaration is under penalty of perjury. She said on November 5th, I was contacted on election night. We close the polls after the absentee ballots have entered into the tabulator. We take our ISD cards to the machine and take them, the security fob, and the results of the electronic poll book to the county clerk's office that night. She said, I received my ISD cards when I went to the county building and received my precinct kits from Connie Wing prior to the election and never received nor was made aware of an update as I did not need any updates. On Thursday, November 5th, I was contacted by Connie Wing of the county clerk's office and asked that I bring my tabulated locked ballot container and tabulator to the clerk's office for retabulation. Because of time constraints, a retabulation did not occur, and I was asked to return on Friday, November 6th. I was given the ISD cards and security fob. We set it up, and the retabulation began at 9. We finished at 8:55. The retabulation was done in the presence of the Antrim County Board of Canvassers and the Antrim County Sheriff, along with the Deputy Clerk, Patricia Marshall. At the completion of the retabulation, all the voted ballots from November 3rd, I asked if the Board of Canvassers was ready for me to close the poll and run the tally tape, which I did. It was at this time that I noticed a number of votes cast on November 6th had changed from the tape on November 3rd. So I stated to the board that the numbers had changed. The board did not respond to my comment. To this date, I still do not know why Central Lake Township was the only township that had to retabulate. Other township clerks asked me why I had to do this, and I could not explain. And that is item number 5 on her declaration. So that's what I know.
Okay, thank you. Well, next we'll go to Representative Steve Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in your analysis, you talked about how the number of votes coming in were at a rate higher than they could actually be processed through the machines.
Correct.
And this is after the polls have closed.
Yes, sir. This is,
So forgive my ignorance here, but the way I understood it is that the numbers don't get counted one by one. A precinct will count all their ballots and then they submit all their numbers. So the fact that there's a lot of numbers coming in within a short period of time isn't because a bunch of ballots all of a sudden get counted. It's because machines from all over the state that had been counting for hours all day long finally decided to upload their information. I mean, am I missing something here? Like, that's how I always understood how these things work is, I live in the city of Wayland. I vote. They, I think 7 to 8 o'clock, they shut down, they do everything, and then they upload it. They didn't all of a sudden run through 1,000 votes. No, those 1,000 votes were counted over hours and hours.
So the timeline of the reporting, which is it's got timestamps on the data files, the data logs, where it's uploaded. Those show 4 spikes that totaled 384,000 votes in a combined interval of 2 hours and 38 minutes. So those.
Why is that not possible? Because they're not running 300,000 ballots through that quickly. That's just
Correct.
machines
Yeah.
from around the entire state. So if you have the city of Detroit with 250,000, obviously Detroit came in later, but hypothetically, there's big cities in Michigan, big precincts, and they start filing at the same time. It seems to me like that's actually quite logical that you would have a lot coming in a short amount of time. As someone who's a political candidate, as I watch the numbers come in, usually there's nothing, and then all of a sudden you get a bunch of spikes. Oh, we got City of Kentwood. Oh, we got Gaines Township. You start seeing things come in. I don't think that's proof of fraud or anything. I think that's just how it works. Am I missing something here?
So if you look at the total number of machines, and the machines can count about 2,000 ballots per hour per machine, the calculation sum would yield about 100,000 ballots as a maximum number of ballots that could be processed.
But they're not
Tabulation
processing that ballot in that
machines.
time frame. They've been processing those ballots all day long. They are just uploading the total number at that time.
They're actually uploaded at various intervals along that timeline throughout the day.
Say that again.
They're uploading those results at various across that timeline throughout the day.
I don't think that's accurate. I don't think they upload results until after everything is done. I mean, that's actually a pretty big deal with Republican, at least. We actually have been very clear of, you don't start reporting the ballots until everything is done, everything is closed out. So I don't think that's actually accurate. If that is accurate, that's something we need to look into, that they're continuously uploading the numbers throughout the day, but that's not my understanding.
Yeah. So if you look the Edison data provided to the New York Times, it shows pretty much of a continual upload throughout the day. And then there are spikes that occur at specific times that are bump loads, but I can provide this to you.
The question is, did you give us that as I know you gave us a packet, that's not in it.
It should be in the affidavit that
Okay,
I
we
provided
don't have
to you,
that.
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
Did he answer your question? Okay. Next, we'll go to Representative Camilleri.
I'll pass. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Representative LaFave.
Yeah, thank you, Representative Johnson. If you and I agree on the thing you were just talking about, that could be a real problem if something is different. But Colonel, tell me if I'm wrong, 10 precincts in the state you believe voted at 100% approximately?
That was according to data from the state. Yes, sir.
6 precincts at above 100%?
Correct.
Add those up for me. About how many votes is that?
We just looked at voter turnout, so I didn't add up the votes from those precincts.
Think you could send me an email? Let me know the total number of votes there.
Why don't you? We'll have him send it to the committee. We'll work with that. We can send it to the clerk. Continue, Rep. LaFave. Did he answer your question?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Okay. All right. And I wanted to, we had talked about Dominion. Was there something that you wanted to discuss about Dominion? I understand that perhaps you've examined these machines. I know for us, we can't get Dominion to come in and testify. And one thing that I would like to do is examine the machines to understand, because my belief is that if we could look at the machines, if we could examine their software, we'd have a good idea then of whether all this stuff is true or not. But the problem that I have is that because Dominion won't come in, they won't testify. They won't provide us machines. They won't do these things. It's hard for me to wrap around this Dominion theory because basically we're going off of what people are saying and we're hearing nothing from Dominion. So, as we're investigating, I think that would be very valuable to us. But from what I understand, you've looked at this. So what can you tell us about the Dominion voting system?
We began looking at these companies, as I mentioned, the team that we joined that had begun studying this back in 2018 after the Kentucky governor's race, and then several races in Texas with the ES&S machines. We really started looking at the lineage of these companies and the code to the software, and they really seem all go back to Smartmatic or SGO Smartmatic. They do have licensure agreements between Smartmatic and Dominion, between Smartmatic and ES&S, which is another major voting machine. And really the core of these voting systems are rife with vulnerabilities. I was an information warfare officer, so I looked at ways to penetrate, defeat, and corrupt other systems, whether it was through electronic warfare, through other means. And these systems are highly vulnerable to penetrations at multiple levels throughout the system. The easiest way and the most discreet way is USB drives. In classified systems in the military, I worked with both secret and top secret and other special access programs. All those machines had the USB drives deactivated. You could not use them just because of the critical vulnerability. These machines all work off of USB drives. And so we've found in dealing with Pennsylvania and in Arizona, there is no control. There is no chain of custody in the USB drives. Workers can stick a USB drive in. We could stick a USB drive into any of your laptops. You don't know what's on there, and you can change software. You can change operating systems with the USB drives. And the core of these systems is manipulability. This is the operator's manual and the implementation statement for 5.1. One of the myths that has been propagated even by the director of CISA at Homeland Security, which is the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, is that, well, these machines are not connected to the internet. In the operator's manual, there's a whole page of references that show you how and when to connect and what selectors to connect to servers and to routers. So it is connected to the internet. That's how you get election night reporting. That's through another company called Clarity Elections. They provide early reporting to the news media. Matter of fact, as I was looking at one of the counties where I saw the spike, I believe it's Oakland County. I was going to the Oakland County, the 2020 elections results, and I clicked on the elections results, and a warning flag pops up to the right side, and it says, "You're leaving this domain. You are going to clarityelections./mi." So the information for the counties in your state isn't really maintained or owned by your county and state, but rather a corporation that's owned by SOE Software and Cytl, SCYTL, which is a Madrid, Spain corporation. It went bankrupt in May of 2020 and was purchased by another UK registered company. So we've recently found, and we're digging further, that there was a $400 million financial transaction to Dominion Voting Systems in October, 1 month before our election. We're digging into that, but we know through some of the leaked information from the Panama banking system that SGO, Smartmatic, and Dominion both share a physical address in a small building in Barbados as registered headquarters. So these companies share licensing agreements. They share a common core of their DNA is the code, is the software. And I'll be happy to provide you an electronic copy of this operator's manual. And when you read through here, and you can see all the options that administrators and operators of these systems have, like some of the previous witnesses mentioned, they can vote blank ballots. They can delete data. They can they can mass adjudicate write-in ballots. And so it is designed to be inaccurate. It's designed to, if an individual or a team of individuals had a malign purpose, this would be the tool that I would want to use.
Can I ask you,
Colonel, tell them the history of Smartmatic. When did it start? Where did it start?
Smartmatic.
And what was it developed to do?
Smartmatic was developed in Venezuela. Hugo Chavez was the president, and basically he invested, I believe, 28% of the money to fund Smartmatic to control the Venezuelan elections. I personally debriefed the son of a Cuban intelligence officer who was at dinner with two of Hugo Chavez's relatives when Maduro's election was in question due to the populist uprising in Venezuela. And they told him, the son of the Cuban intelligence officer, "Don't worry, it's guaranteed. Our father invested the money to start SGO." So,
And have they been involved in numerous elections that have been questioned as to the integrity of the election?
Numerous elections in Central America, the South Pacific, and Europe.
And are they allied with Dominion?
Well, at least in Barbados, with a shared.
Does Dominion
office.
use their software?
The Dominion software, so that where the merger of the DNA comes, is there's the licensing agreement, and as a result of a lawsuit, Sequoia Voting Systems was sold off of SGO and purchased by
Who owned Sequoia?
SGO Smartmatic owned Sequoia. They sold Sequoia Voting Systems to Dominion Voting Systems, and they also purchased Premier as a result of an antitrust. So all of the DNA and the code and the software in these machines are very, very similar. As a matter of fact, there's testimony on the House floor as late as July of 2019 that decries that we're actually still using this equipment that is full of holes. My team is doing analysis all over the country right now. We're we can't meet the demand because there's so much. But there was about a 40-page document with the vulnerabilities that was pulled down off of Stacey Abrams' website about these systems across the party, across the aisle. There have been Democratic senators, Senator Klobuchar, Senator Warren, as well as Republicans. So this is an American issue. This is a national security issue. Our voting systems are defined as national critical infrastructure, just as critical as nuclear power plants, just as critical as petrochemical, steel, and ports.
What's fractional voting?
Can I ask? I'm going to ask a question here. So I just wanted to understand why. So when we hear these things, they say in the press, they say this has been debunked, right? Every time I read about this, they say this has been debunked. Please, we don't want to have to remove anybody, and I'm serious. We're not supposed to yell out here, but let me ask you. When you hear that, why do you think they're saying that? Because we do hearings like this. For many people, this is the only time they hear testimony like yours. But why are they saying that it's debunked? Do you have a theory on that?
I have a theory in life, and it's about people and personal behavior. It's either a variable of competence or a variable of commitment. In this case, they would be either incompetent. They haven't done the research like I and my team have done. They haven't looked to the user's manual of these systems. They haven't rationally thought that, okay, these election votes are updated in real time. How does that happen? Nobody's getting in from a car from Lansing, Michigan, and driving it to New York to be uploaded at the Rockefeller Center. So these are connected. And actually in the operating diagrams of the systems, the high-level block diagram, this is Democracy Suite. It shows Democracy Suite, EMS application and document management server, the Democracy Suite database server, the data center. This is data. This is electronic data. Your ballots are put into the machine and they're turned from a paper ballot to a ballot image. And the ballot image is data, and the data can be manipulated with something as easy as a USB drive.
Thank you. Representative Riley.
Thank you. So I'm just trying to figure out, would not a recount detect if you had a software manipulate the votes? Wouldn't that be easily seen?
So what we observed, and your other witnesses tonight observed, is a injection of paper ballots. Whether those are accurate or not, you could recount the manual ballots, but unless you did a forensic audit of the ballot itself, you wouldn't be able to tell if the ballot was fraudulent or pre-printed. We have technology to be able to do that. A gentleman that I'm associated with in Texas, his name is Javon Pulitzer. He invented the QR code and scanner and scanning capability, owns a patent on all that. He's devised a way to determine fake ballots or ballots who were pre-printed. So
yeah, but isn't that another issue altogether? I'm just talking about
this is a multifaceted issue, but yes, the forensics data, if you have access to the software code that was driving the algorithms in these machines, and I say algorithm because the data that's the raw feed of the data is reported in decimal places. So if you're tabulating votes, your vote, my vote, Representative Johnson's votes, well, that's 3 votes. This data is reported in 3-digit fractions. So how is that possible in an additive function? So the software and the code is what we would need, or a qualified forensics team of your choice would need to look at to determine what algorithms were in the USB drives that drive the machines. And the number pattern that we see is that they would pick 3 to 4 precincts. They would run the algorithm for an X amount of time till they got close to the precinct threshold, so it wouldn't kick off the overvote situation, and then they would move it to another precinct. So this is a complex issue with injection. In Pennsylvania, we heard a gentleman who again signed an affidavit as a truck driver that he delivered a truckload of ballots to a vacant lot in Pennsylvania from New York. And his assumption was the ballots were just left there. There was no one there to sign his bill of lading, to give the bill of lading. So the hypothesis or the assumption is that was used as a staging area for people to go pick up pre-printed ballots to move into the system. For example, what we saw in some of the late absentee numbers in Michigan.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. With that, we'll move on. Thank you for your testimony today. We appreciate it. And now we're going to invite up one more person, Monica Palmer, who's a Wayne County canvasser, if I understand right. And then we'll let you testify for a couple minutes, tell your story, and then we'll let the Trump legal team close after that. So we ran a little long on that first witness, and we wanted to give some deference there because obviously she had been, she'd been through a lot, and she really shared a very powerful story. And you could tell, I mean, it's intimidating to come here to the legislature and to deal with what she's dealt with. But, we appreciate that she came to tell her story. We wanted to give her some time. But we wanted to also allow you, Monica, to come in and testify. So when you're ready, please tell your story and explain why you're here. Thank you. Make sure you push the red button.
Thank you, Chairman Hall and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to address you this evening. I am Monica Palmer. I am the chair of the Wayne County Board of Canvassers. As you may be aware, after the primary, we had 76% of the precincts, the absentee precincts in the city of Detroit were unrecountable because they were out of balance without explanation. We had bipartisan support and a request for an investigation by the State Bureau of Elections, and we requested the Secretary of State to assist with administering the general election in November in the city of Detroit for the absentees. After the primary, when we had the 76% of out of balance precincts, I had people question me, Monica, is it fraud or is it human error? And at that point, I didn't know because I'd never witnessed the process before. So election night, 9 p.m., November 3rd, I went down to TCF Center. I was credentialed as a GOP challenger, and I went in to observe the process, hoping to see some improvements being made. I did not challenge anything while I was there. I was strictly there to observe. I did note one thing, the ballot containers, the metal boxes that hold the ballots once everything's sealed up at the end of the evening. The Board of Canvassers, the County Board of Canvassers are responsible on an incremental basis to touch and feel and make sure that those ballot containers are secure. And they're labeled with a sticker that says this container is certified and it's got the signatures of the board members on it. As I was walking through TCF Center, I located 5 ballot containers that had red "do not use" labels on them. They were damaged. They were new containers that were ordered. They had manufacturing defects. The weld on the back seal, the seal on the welding on the back side was not completed properly, and you could slide paper in and out of the back of the boxes. Those containers that were used with the red labels will not be recountable. The chain of custody has been broken for those boxes. I was at TCF Center for 26 hours straight. I got there 9 o'clock election night. I left around 11 p.m. Wednesday evening after counting had been completed. They were working on closing up the poll books. There's a lot of other testimony from challengers that can describe the activities that happened in there. I won't waste your time with that. I want to move on to the canvas. We had processed gone through the initial canvas of about 20% of the absentee counting boards and realized that the number of voters in the poll book, so people cast, did not match the number on the tabulator tape, ballots cast. It is the job of the canvas, the county canvas, to correct any mathematical errors, to make those two numbers balance or reconcile the difference. The good news here is that the batches of ballots that may have been scanned multiple times, the job of the canvas is to catch that mathematical error and correct it. So if you have 100 voters, 100 ballots that were issued, and there's 300 ballots that were tabulated, you count the ballots in the box, it should match the ballots that were issued, 100, 100. You retabulate them, and that's corrected. Things you cannot catch in the ballot in the canvas. You cannot catch date stamps on envelopes. You cannot catch the validity of a voter, whether they're dead or not. You cannot catch signature verification. Those are things we do not look at within the canvas. Just a little point of reference to help you manage through the details you're hearing. An observation for TCF Center. In the primary, we had workers, poll workers working long hours. There appeared to be a change in the general election, where there were shifts of employees. And I believe that was a positive change, was good to see. So you didn't have people very, very, very tired trying to close these boxes out. What I did notice on the night shift, election night, 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. the next morning, there were 134 counting boards. They had 5 workers at each table and supervisors throughout. The majority of that shift, those workers were not processing ballots. They were sitting idle. So as you're looking forward to legislation and concerns about, do we need more time to process these ballots? The time is not involved in actually going through the ballots or scanning them through the tabulators. It's the adjudication process. And the adjudication process is a screen. If there's a ballot that the machine can't read, humans have to view that ballot on a screen and make a determination. That process is the bottleneck in the timeline that it took to get through processing the absentee ballots in Detroit. So as you move forward with potential legislation, maybe look at some funding sources to get the right amount of equipment to help them get through that. Back to the canvas and the numbers not matching. 20% into processing the absentee ballots, we realized we had a large portion that did not match. And it's standard procedure to contact the clerk when you have that happen, to ask if they have any envelopes that may not be scanned, if they have anything stuck in an auxiliary bin, ask them for a corrected list if possible. We did not get corrected statement of voters, so people cast, until 13 days after the election. It was the afternoon, the day before certification, when a large black tote was brought into the canvas containing multiple precincts' new voter lists. Some of those voter lists managed to make the balances work out. At the end of the day, less than 24 hours later, the canvas was given a verbal report for the plus and minus. We were not provided with an executive summary written, even though I requested one. And that oral report, my quick math showed that 71% of the counting boards, and we've got to be careful, because in the primary we were talking precincts, now we're talking counting boards, which are, it's a different math formula. But 71% of those counting boards were unexplained without, were unbalanced without explanation. Having less than 24 hours to get corrected voter lists and going through 134 counting boards to make those differences is not a lot of time. And that is why I originally voted no on the certification, because I believe the state needed 10 more days to continue to dig through that to find those explanations. as you continue to move forward through legislation, with the information I was giving, I can't tell if there was an issue with missing scanning envelopes, if there's an issue with the voter file, with the poll books, with the supplemental lists, with the unlisted list. I don't have that information to be able to know to tell you how to fix that. But getting corrected information 13 days after the election is not the way to go about it. And one more item to note, in the State Board of Canvassers meeting, Daniel Baxter said that they did not issue any revised poll lists. I don't know if he was misinformed or misspoke, but there were clearly an entire tote of revised lists delivered the day before the certification. And I'm happy to answer any questions, and due to time, if you have additional questions, please reach out to me afterwards.
All right, thank you, Monica. And, I heard stories about how you were threatened and bullied and attacked by a lot of these radical left-wing people. And so I have my sympathies for that. And you have my sympathies for that. I know you've been through a lot, and it's courageous for you to be here and testifying today. So thank you. With that, I'll go to Representative Weber.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your service on the Board of Canvassers. My question is, do you have any recommendations for this committee and the legislature with regard to empowering Board of Canvassers to maybe have a more substantial role in the process going forward? I know reading some of the media reports, you seemed kind of frustrated with the limitation of what you could and couldn't do in the canvass.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. The Board of Canvassers across the state of Michigan, most of the other boards in the other counties, the 4 canvassers are the ones going through every poll book and looking at the number of voters and the number on the tape. Wayne County is huge, and it has different rules because there's so much work. 4 people wouldn't be able to complete it. The county clerk's staff is assisting the Wayne County Board of Canvassers. And I've only been on the board for 2 years. I roll up my sleeves and get involved, and I'm going through poll books with staff to help understand the process. I think if I'm going to certify this election, attesting that it's valid, I need to know what's going on. My understanding is that Wayne County operating differently has not been involved in the actual processing process that much. But in return, I think maybe what you might have been asking was more authority for the Board of Canvassers, because we have no control over what the clerk does. We have no control over the Secretary of State. We have no authority to demand an audit. We have no authority to tell anyone how to change their processes. But at the end of the day, we're holding the bag for whatever results come out of the election.
Thank you. Representative Camilleri.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your testimony. I also first wanted to say thank you for doing your job and certifying the election. I really do appreciate that. One thing that I would like for us to just clarify here, as we know, the unbalanced precincts are not unique. It's not unique to this election. It happens in other elections in years past. The rate of unbalanced precincts in Detroit and cities like Livonia were roughly the same. So why did we have such a focus from your public statements as well as others that you've made to the media and at your Board of Canvassers meeting? Why was the focus specifically on Detroit's unbalanced precincts and not more so on other cities like the city of Livonia?
I was not given a written executive summary prior to the meeting. If you watch the Zoom call, staff was listing off communities plus or minus in or out of balance. They're referred to Detroit or out of county. Livonia was specifically brought up because there were some troubles there. But when you're referencing out of county and Detroit, it's already separated into 2 different groups. I was doing the math on fly, scribbling, and referenced the percentage comparing it to the primary because we already had identified that there was an issue that we were hoping to see some improvements in. The actual motion that came to certify the election that came with a resolution for an audit requested an audit of all of Wayne County, all of the unbalanced, unexplained precincts, not just the city of Detroit. It did get heated after the no vote, and there was some hostility from board member comments. There was some pressure from council. I did initially reference Detroit first. A few sentences later, I did bring up Livonia as well. I was not singling out one community. This is about making sure that we have accurate documentation that can be audited and that there's explanations. And that's what I was trying to accomplish. Thank you.
And I understand, like in Livonia, and this might not be related, but in Livonia, I heard because we had a state house race there that was pretty close, a couple hundred votes. And then what I understand happened is that somehow they can't recount most of the precincts. Can you explain that?
Sure. So if you have 103 ballots that are issued, people cast. If you have 3 individuals who spoil their ballot, they make a mistake and they take it and they say, I need a new ballot. So you issue another one. So now you have 106 ballots that have been issued. You only have 103 that are counted, and you have 3 ballots that are in an envelope for spoiled ballots. 106 does not equal 103, but there are notes in the poll book and there are spoiled ballots that you can reconcile the difference. They're out of balance. It's a normal occurrence, not a problem. The problem is when you have 106 ballots cast, people, and you've got 135 in your total for the votes for the night. And if there's no explanation in the poll books how you get there, it's not recountable, and that is a problem. And specifically to your point in Livonia, where you've got a state house race, when you have communities that have this a high number of precincts that are unexplained and not recountable, it's going to hurt the recount for your mayor, your city council, the school board members. In Highland Park, the last time we had a recount in there, it was a city council recount, and half of the precincts couldn't be recounted. We had an entire community in there hoping to see the numbers and make sure it was right. And the candidate was distraught when she filed to have all of the precincts recounted and half of them couldn't be recounted. We've got to figure out how to get it right.
Yeah, I think just for me, that's always something I found very odd is, like for many years we have elections and then they say, well, we can't recount Detroit or we can't recount Wayne County because they say either the boxes are unsealed or the ballots don't add up. Was that widespread in Wayne County this time? Or was it limited to Livonia or what?
Again, if I had a written executive summary that showed me every precinct for the entire county, I could have prepared and highlighted and went, these 15 communities outside of Detroit all had problems. I don't have that information. I still don't have that report.
Wow. Now what is being, in Wayne County, which is where you can speak to, do you know, why does this sort of thing happen election after election? And maybe it happens elsewhere, but you're the Wayne County canvasser. So I just want to understand, as a canvasser, what do you say to the elections people when they tell you this year again, the ballot boxes are unsealed, the ballots don't add up? What do you say to them? Because I can't figure it out. Why is it always that way? What do you say to them to improve that? Please, 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 sir. Please, sir. Please, sir. Please, sir. Please, sir. All right. So my question though is on Wayne County and the city of Detroit. Do you hear from them to say, what are they going to do to stop this from happening in the future, so we can recount these precincts. And we're, you know, in these, there is a trail.
We made that request after the primary.
And what happened?
I have not seen a report from the investigation. I saw lots of press releases from Secretary Benson saying that she was going to help with staff, and it did look like there was plenty of staff around TCF Center, so that appeared to be an improvement. I asked for a meeting with Clerk Winfrey prior to the election to try to understand the process a little bit better, to see what kind of improvements were being made. I did not receive a meeting with her before the election.
So would you say that in these election officials in Wayne County are not following the laws there?
I can't say that. I don't
Okay.
know that to be true.
But they're not communicating well. Would that be right to say they're not communicating what they're doing to why these problems are still happening with you as a canvasser?
I have no authority over that position. The clerk is not required to communicate with me.
Yeah, that seems like a problem.
Yeah. And
Well, sure. Thank you for sharing that. I didn't know the answer to that. We'll go now to Representative Riley.
Thank you. Yeah, when it comes to the precincts that don't balance, is there a quantity that we know? Is that public knowledge?
that don't balance or that don't balance unexplained.
No, the
Because being out of balance, if it's explained, is okay, it's recountable.
Okay, but do we know the quantity when something is not balanced? Do we know the quantity of votes?
I believe I asked for a cumulative total because you have some that are higher and some that are lower. And the verbal number that was given to me during the canvassers meeting, I believe was around 400. But again, if I had a written executive summary that showed me every precinct that was plus or minus, there would be a total at that bottom of the page and we could look at it real easy.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Representative C.A. Johnson.
Good afternoon, and thank you for being here, and thank you for what you do, and thank you for your vote.
Please, let's let her ask questions.
Mr. Chair, when we get a chance, I'd like to have this kind of even because we have a Detroiter.
Representative, I think you made that point earlier.
Oh.
And as I said, we're going to have more hearings, but what is your question?
No, I would like to have her address this body.
Okay.
She is a
We're
Detroiter.
going to move on, Representative, if you don't have a question. I'll go now to Representative Johnson, Steve Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you talked about getting a number of revised poll books. Is that could you explain what that is? Because I'm not an elections guy.
Sure.
Explain that to me. Thank you.
Okay, in your poll book, there is a section that's the statement of voters. So for the absentees, it will show all the absentee ballots that were issued, requested, issued, and received. And you can see the dates in there for every person. And there's a total at the bottom. So on election, I believe it was Sunday that the poll books were printed. So all of the ballots that were received by Sunday when they were printed are in this list. There's a supplemental list for any ballots received after that. Okay, because you've got ballots coming in on election day while they're being processed. You add those two together once the polls are closed and you've got your total number of ballots received on election day, you add those two numbers together and that should be the total of ballots that you have sitting here. If they don't match, your phone call is to the clerk and say, why don't they match? Do you have envelopes that are sitting on your desk that didn't get scanned? There is a method of going through the entire pile of envelopes to make sure every single one of them is scanned, and it does take some time. But in order to be able to make the mathematical corrections, how do you know, is my list of voters right, or is my number of ballots right? So you try to get, if there's any updates that need to be made to that list of voters, you try to make sure you've got that correct number to start from. Does that help?
That does help. Now, is it possible for someone to, let's say we're doing an investigation audit, can we see the original poll book as well as the revised version, or is only the revised version out
My
there?
understanding is that staff retains the original list and the revised list.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Representative LeGrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So help me understand this, because I've been involved in recounts in my county, and we have exactly, this issue is pretty much universal. Like, it's a question of ratios change, but like nobody has 100% balanced precincts. And we heard testimony in the committee about that previously. My understanding was that you could recount if your tabulated number equals the number of paper ballots you have, not that it has to equal the poll book. Am I wrong on that? And if that's true, then I think you can recount a whole lot more than the 71. You're saying 70% of them roughly can't be recounted?
Yeah,
I don't think that's right.
my understanding is that the votes, the people cast must match the votes cast. And then once you open it up, you count the paper ballots, and the paper ballots have to match the ballots cast.
Correct, but then that makes that recountable. In other words, if there's a tension with the poll book at that point, it doesn't make that an unrecountable precinct.
But in order to open the seal, my understanding is that they have to match.
Okay, that's not my understanding, but there's no point in us debating, since neither one of us, we'd have to appeal to our higher authority on that one. But
Thank
but
you.
that's not my understanding, for what it's worth, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. All right, that's what the questions we have. So thank you for coming today. Oh, no, Representative Lefebvre, sorry, I'm keeping, we've had so many people testify. I have so many tallies, so I missed that one. So Representative Lefebvre, thanks for waiting. Please, when you're ready, ask your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We talk about big boxes, these big metal boxes that had the stamp of approval or not by the Board of Canvassers. What are these boxes? What are they for? How big are they? This is multiple questions. I'm sorry. Tell me about the boxes, how big they are, how many ballots there are potentially in each one of them, and what they're for.
So the boxes are about this tall, about this wide. There was a batch of 50 new boxes purchased by the city of Detroit from Election Source, and roughly 30 of those boxes were defective. They're metal, and there's two sides that meet along the back, and the welds were not done properly, so there's a gap along the back seam. We rejected about 30 of those. Sometime before the November election, they did bring us some repaired containers, and we went through them and then took the red do not use tags off and put certified labels on those. But if I remember correctly, there were only 24, and I could be off by 1 or 2, 24 that came back repaired. As to how many ballots were in those containers, I would have to ask staff. I would maybe look online. I have the precinct number or the absentee counting board numbers, but I don't have the associated ballot counts with those counting boards. Does that answer all of your question?
Well, I only get one, so I would just like to say, I mean, if you buy 50 boxes and 30 of them are defective, let's never buy from that company again.
All right. Thank you, Monica. That's the last question for you. We appreciate you coming to testify. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. With that, Mr. Giuliani, we'll let you make your, any closing remarks you have. And it is an hour over what I said it was going to be. Sorry about that, everybody. But we wanted to hear these people. I know that many feel that these people haven't been heard. And so we wanted to provide an opportunity for people to bring forward their stories and be heard. And we've tried to do that today, as did the Senate, I think, yesterday very well. Senate Oversight Committee. But we wanted to offer you an opportunity to speak, and then I will let each member ask you a question. All right? So go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, this represents the affidavits of the witnesses that we didn't have the time to call.
Yeah, make sure that that button's
I'm
pushed.
sorry.
Thanks. Go ahead.
This represents the affidavits of the people that we didn't get a chance to call. There are hundreds of them, and they specifically allege similar acts of fraud, very similar to the witnesses that you heard. I find it puzzling that there seems to be such confusion about it. Maybe because of my background as a prosecutor, it's pretty obvious to me what happened here. The Democratic leader in Pittsburgh, in Pennsylvania, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, or in Philadelphia, or in Detroit, or in Las Vegas, or in Phoenix, or in Milwaukee, or in Minneapolis, or in Atlanta, didn't wake up on election morning when all those mail ballots were going to come in and decide we're going to shut out all the Republican poll watchers, or as many as we can. I mean, we've been counting absentee ballots forever. I did it myself when I was a young lawyer. Republican sits on one side, Democrat sits on the other side. We don't have any problem with it. This was uniform shutting out of as many Republicans as possible. In Pennsylvania, 890,000 ballots were cast secretly, with no Republican getting a chance to take a look at the ballot. And in Pennsylvania, there are 600,000 more votes counted, mail votes counted, than mail ballots they can find. This is a swindle. It's a con job. It's the theft of an election. And it was carried out by the same method in the city of Detroit. And with all due respect to Detroit, several analyses of corrupt cities, my city, New York, comes ahead of Detroit. So I'm not saying this with any pride, but it happens to be one of the most corrupt cities in the United States. On any measure, I just checked online here, it comes in 4th, 5th, 3rd, 7th, 8th. Several times New York comes in ahead. So I wonder why the confusion about what happened. They stole the election. Not the first one they stole, not the last one they're going to steal unless you do something about it. But you do something real, not, let's see how we're going to fix it. You've been fixing it for years, and it hasn't gotten fixed. They've been stealing elections for years. And this time, they got a chance to steal it really big because of the ridiculous mail ballot that was created. Back in 1960, the mayor of Chicago, the most corrupt city in America, by the way, just in case, on all the lists, by far, we can all feel better. Chicago's the most corrupt. He helped to steal the 1960 election by holding back the ballots in Chicago so the Republican ballots would come in. And then along with a gentleman named Sam Giancana, they got the ballots they needed to elect their candidate. Last year, 2 years ago in Florida, the same thing happened in Palm Beach and Broward County. It was a 2-point election, Senate, governor. Palm Beach County took 2.5 weeks to report. And finally it ended when they caught a truck like the one coming from Bayport, New York to Philadelphia. They caught a truck in Jacksonville headed to Palm Beach with 100,000 ballots that pretended to be Palm Beach ballots, but they were done up in Jacksonville. And then they had to end the election and they prosecuted the people in Palm Beach. And remember, this year, we had no problem in Florida. I mean, you were counting for an eternity. Florida was over with that night because the governor had the courage to straighten it out. He had the courage to prosecute the people who committed the fraud. You don't end fraud by prospective measures to deal with fraud. You know how you end fraud? You put criminals in jail. That's how you end fraud. You have the courage. You have the courage to say that certification that was done by your state is a complete phony. It's a false statement made to the United States government. Those are prosecutable, by the way. That's not the vote by any means in Michigan. That's not the vote in Michigan. I don't know what the vote in Michigan is, but it's at least 300,000 or 400,000 votes off from what the real vote in Michigan is. And you heard the anger and the upset of your citizens. They seem to have more passion about it than you do. They figured out what happens because they live on the street. They know what happens in Detroit. Don't scratch your head about what happens in Detroit. They steal elections in Detroit.
Representative, you'll have an
And
opportunity
they steal
to ask
elections
a
in New
question.
York, and they steal elections in Boston, and they steal elections in Philadelphia. And the Democrats were smart enough to pick 10 corrupt cities to play their game out. 10 cities in which they could get away with it. 10 cities in which they could go into court and find a hack judge that will decide anything they want. So, I mean, we can live in this strange world all we want, but we're getting at the point where our freedoms are beginning to be eroded. Our right of free speech has been eroded substantially by the censorship imposed by big tech, big media, big corporations, and the Democrat Party. Our right of freedom of religion, with the ridiculous dictatorial way in which the COVID regulations are imposed on us, like they like to be dictators, these Democrat governors, they're taking away our right of the freedom of religion. Those are basically the two reasons we founded this country. Oh, by the way, there was a third, the right to freely and honestly elect our government. And they're taking that away from us too. It should not go without notice. And you should spend time taking a look at Pennsylvania, look at Philadelphia, look at Pittsburgh, look at how eerily similar it is to what these people testified to. Read the rest of these and see that there are hundreds of people that back them up. That election center in Detroit was a disgrace. You should be ashamed of it as citizens of Michigan. I would be ashamed of it if it was in New York, and it could easily be in New York. And I would do everything in my power to make sure it never happened again. And I would never certify an election or have my name associated with anything that was false. Now, it is your responsibility to do that. Not the governor, not the Secretary of State. You were given that responsibility by our founding fathers. They decided who would be the final arbiter, who should overlook a presidential election. And in Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2, the power is given to you. In the McPherson case in 1892, the United States Supreme Court made clear that you can take that power back anytime you want to. Anytime. You can take it back tonight. You can take it back the day before the electors go down to Washington. You can take it back anytime you want. And in case you think it's old law, it was reiterated in Bush v. Gore. You have the right to take it back. You are the final arbiter of how honest or not your election is in your state. And it's your responsibility to stand up to that. And all I can tell you is, we let them get away with this. I don't know what happens after this. This was a concerted plan to fix this election. There's no way that Donald Trump was ahead by 800,000 votes going to bed at night, that he was ahead here by 300,000 votes, that he was ahead in Wisconsin by 400,000 votes, that he was ahead in every state, that over a 4 or 5 day period with this ridiculously corrupt system of counting, they turned around with ballots coming in the back door, ballots being driven down from New York. There's no way that this wasn't stolen. And what it takes is courage. Courage. Not to be afraid of what's happened to these poor people. They've got guts to stand up to what the Democrats do to them. And it's not just the wild and crazy left-wing Democrats who do it. They do it as a way of bullying us. You can see their behavior in this hearing. I can see the difference in behavior between two sides. Maybe sometimes we're too nice. Maybe sometimes we're too decent. Or maybe we shouldn't change. But one thing we should have is we have the ability to defend ourselves and not let our people get kicked around the way those Republicans were kicked around. They wouldn't let it happen, and we shouldn't let it happen.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With that, and I asked the crowd, let's be respectful. I think one thing I've made, sir, please, sir, you're out of line. Please, we're having a legislative hearing here. So, I've said all members of this committee, if they wish, can ask a question. I hope we're respectful about that. So with that, I'll allow Representative LeGrand.
So, Mr. Giuliani, I really just have one question for you. We heard testimony tonight that you got an affidavit from one of these witnesses on November 8, witness who talked about tens of thousands of ballots being riffed through a machine. We had another witness who talked about ballots being double counted, who said that her affidavit dates back to November 3rd. You opened your statement, you made in your opening statement, you referenced 700,000 fraudulent ballots in Detroit, which is problematic given that there were only 250,000 counted. My question is, given that we have paper ballots in Michigan, why on earth did you not ask for a recount?
Well, there'd be no reason to ask for a recount because you just recount the same fraudulent ballots. Once you have separated the envelope from the absentee ballot or mail-in ballot, you are forever unable to audit them. That's the reason why it is so critical that they be inspected. That's the reason why from time immemorial that's been done and honored by both political parties and honored in the breach by your political party this time nationwide. 71%. There is no way, when they recounted in Atlanta, they just recounted all of the same fraudulent ballots. There's no way to trace those ballots. And that's why the inspection is so critical. And that's why, please don't, I don't need
Sir,
help. Believe me,
please,
I don't need help.
let's allow the conversation. Let's stop yelling in the crowd. Thank
And
you.
the reality is, if your political party had not bullied, pushed people around, intimidated people, and stopped them from doing their job as inspectors, this would not have happened.
Thank you. Representative Camilleri.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Giuliani, this committee heard testimony from a bipartisan group of county clerks in Michigan. One was a Democrat and two were Republicans. They testified that they found no evidence whatsoever of widespread irregularities in this election. And they lauded the municipal clerks and their teams who run elections in Michigan for their tireless effort and commitment to free, fair, and safe elections. Your team has now lost 39 court cases in the aftermath of the election, with judges ruling that there's inadequate evidence to support the sweeping claims that you are making and repeating here tonight, and the unprecedented relief that you are seeking. Yesterday, we learned that U.S. Attorney General William Barr has similarly found no evidence whatsoever of widespread irregularities that are worth investigating. If our local clerks, state and federal judges across the country, and the highest ranking law enforcement official in the United States cannot find any substance to or any merit in any of your arguments, why should we? Why should we sit here in the show that you are partaking in and taking around the country if no one has found any evidence whatsoever of any of your wrongdoing? And why should we not believe the reported attempts of you to try to seek a pardon from the president?
What was the last part?
That last part is not.
You're attempting to
relevant
seek a
the
pardon, so why is this not
Representative-
part of that?
I will ask that he be disciplined for that. First of all,
Hold on. Let's
first of all, what he says
hold
is
it.
untrue. Second, that is a defamation of my professional character.
I said
Do you
report-
allow that? Do you allow that to happen in your legislature?
As I said,
I said reported.
As I said, Representative, let's keep it limited to the germane issue here. So,
Just for
Mr.
just for the
Giuliani,
record,
let me
just
ask
for the
the
record,
question.
we haven't lost 39 cases. We've only brought 3. So you're wrong about that. Second, the reason why people are reaching those conclusions is because, like you, they don't have the discipline, maybe the intelligence, I don't know, to read through this, and to read 20 more like it. You can't tell me there's no evidence when I have a couple of thousand affidavits from people You can't tell me that your credibility is better than the credibility of those people. They swore under oath. You didn't.
Mr.
And you seem very, very free to
Representative-
lie.
Mr. Giuliani,
Representative,
I'm just
you have a
hoping,
point of order?
I'm just hoping to get an answer to the other questions about Mr. Barr and others who have disproven a lot of
Representative,
I
what
gave you the
you have a
answer.
point of order?
The answer that I gave you is they didn't bother to interview a single witness. Just like you, they don't want to know the truth. Well, you probably know the truth. I'm worried about their not wanting to know the truth.
Thank you. Representative C.A. Johnson.
Well, I want to take the time to thank everybody and to thank you, Mr. Giuliani. And I will take the time to just give some quotes that some of my constituents made today. Our elected officials should be condemning,
What is your question, Representative?
Sir,
I'm asking you, what is your
no,
question?
I don't have a question. I would like
If
to.
you don't have a question, then we're going to move on, Representative.
No, that is not fair, sir.
Representative
because
Riley,
Our
we're gonna move
elected
on.
officials should be condemning, not.
I'm sorry, you're out of order, Representative. You're out of order. You're out of order. You don't have a question. You're out of order. Representative, you're out of order. You're out of order, Representative. You're out of order, ma'am. You're out of order, Representative. Representative Riley.
Thank you. Mr. Giuliani. So I just wanted to make sure that you were aware that there was real concern before this election by many individuals that there was going to be some crimes committed. And I think one of the ways that we saw that is when we realized that the training that was put on really revealed that it was going to be intentional to mislead some of the poll workers, et cetera, the poll on what to do in the situations that were coming up. So prior to the election, when we saw the training, there was some individuals that made it public that they had gone to some of the trainings, reported back, actually had evidence through recording the trainings and said, these people are going to, this is not right. And so it was not until that came out that and a lawsuit or suit came out that said basically that was taken to the Court of Claims where they had to rule on this to say, you have to allow people to come up and do your job and get within 6 feet to do your job as a poll challenger. It wasn't until that court case that happened. I also submitted an investigation, asked for an investigation from the Secretary of State prior to the election on this very thing. So I think there were some crimes committed when it comes to impeding what a challenger's role is. I believe it's a felony in the state to do that. And we have a responsibility, I believe, to do that. So I just want to make sure you're aware that we saw this coming and there was an effort to head this off.
Well, I appreciate that. Only thing I would say is I believe it's much worse than you realized it was going to be. And it is not confined by any means to Michigan. I mean, this is what you are describing, cutting off Republican inspectors, happened in 10 cities, all Democrat-controlled cities, all cities with a history of corruption, and in numbers that are not insignificant, in numbers like the hundreds of thousands. Enough to change the election.
All right. And I guess Representative Steve Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Giuliani, for being here today. The purpose of this committee is to search for truth. Whether you like it or not, the goal here is truth. What really happened? In that search for truth are things maybe we aren't happy with, maybe things we are happy with. It's led me to a couple understandings here that are going to probably make people on both sides angry. Number one, starting with Dominion, people that are essentially running our election, refusing to come before this committee and explain themselves. Amen. They are essentially a government contractor. We pay them, I assume, millions of dollars, and yet they will not come before this committee to answer tough questions. I think at the very least, their contract should be pulled going forward. However, let me continue. We could sit here and we could talk all day long about Dominion, about whether it's accurate, whether there's fraud, whether they're cheating, whether there's foreign influence. And your word is as good as mine. The only way we can actually know for sure whether Dominion actually changed the results of the election is through a hand recount. Now, I understand a hand recount would not, I understand
Let's
that a
let
hand
Representative
recount
Johnson speak, please.
would not find dead people voting, would not find maybe illegal people voting, but a hand recount would determine if 20 votes went in for someone and the machine said 25 votes came out. A hand recount would identify that. And yet 48 hours, you have 48 hours after the vote certification to request the recount, and we never got that. So instead, what we hear is a lot of talk, a lot of thoughts, a lot of allegations, but we had one opportunity to actually do this, and the Trump campaign did not make that request. That's number one. Moving to Detroit, which is where a lot of this has been centered, and rightfully so. What we saw at the TCF Center was absolutely unacceptable. When you see where they are purposely violating a court order regarding the 6-foot rule, a purposeful violation. This isn't some old court order. This was right before the election. They knew darn well about that court order, and they purposely violated that. Chain of custody issues, absolutely huge. They have boxes that are open with ballots. Shocking. It's a box. You can't find a box that actually does its job. And then when you see, and there's video proof of this, not only just the testimony today, but you can see it online where when Republicans were being kicked out, they were being cheered. People were cheering when Republicans were being kicked out. And Republicans were not being let in to fill those spots. When you see the number of out-of-balance precincts, out-of-balance counting boards, not just this election, but previous elections as well in the city of Detroit, the citizens of Detroit deserve better. I quite frankly believe their city clerk should resign based off of their...
Representative,
I'm going to
will
get
you
my
ask your
question right here.
All right.
However, looking at the votes in Detroit, the votes that are reported, 2016, Hillary Clinton received 234,871 votes. Biden this year, in a high record turnout year, 233,908. That means Biden received 1,000 less votes than Hillary Clinton, one of the most despised candidates of all time. Trump, 2016, 7,682 votes. 2020, 12,654, a 5,000 vote increase. So, to Mr. Giuliani, my question to you is, looking at all of the issues with Detroit, and there are a lot of them, how can we still justify that there was that mass cheating when still Trump's numbers increased by a net 5% versus years before? If someone were cheating, would those numbers not go the exact opposite direction?
No, he might have increased by 10% if it were a legitimate vote. I mean, he was ahead here. He was ahead here by 300,000 votes, which was a massive surprise. Also, let me go back to why we didn't ask for a recount. Doing a recount of the machines is not going to give us anything but the same false result. What we need is a forensic examination of the machines. Yes. Yes. Number two, this election was, I don't know how much the machines are going to yield anyway. This election was stolen by mail-in ballots. Those are the ballots that were stuck in the machine 8 times, 9 times, 10 times. Look at the numbers. I mean, Biden, I'm guessing now, I've forgotten the numbers here, but Biden got like 80% of the mail-in ballot vote, and Trump got 75% of the election day vote. So we're not going to quarrel with the election day vote. The election day vote is not what stole the election from us. It's the mail ballots, the ones that they wouldn't allow us to inspect. I mean, do you really think, Representative, that they shut us out from inspecting the ballots because they were handling the ballots honestly? I mean, do you really think they en masse pushed us out, put us in corrals, pushed us away, went to court to fight whether or not we can be close to the ballots? You think they did that because they were doing a very careful, honest vote? I doubt it.
I've been very clear that I think there's some major issues there. But when you talk about the...
Yeah, but those major issues, when you look at the numbers, the major issues when you look at the numbers are astounding. hundreds of thousands of votes were counted there. And I have no idea what a recanvassing of the machines would do for us. A forensic examination of the machines might do something. And in fact, we would like to have the opportunity to look at the rest of those machines in Michigan. I don't know why you're not looking at them. I mean, whatever you want to say about Dominion, read its history. Read the history of Dominion, and you will get an idea of what a crooked company it is, which maybe is the reason they don't want to show up here. They really don't want to tell you that the two of them that own it are Venezuelans, and they brought the two Smartmatic owners, they brought the two guys who are Canadians down to meet Chavez just 2 years ago. They don't want to tell you that. They don't want to tell you about the 5 elections in South America that they fixed. Just read it. Just look it up. Now, I don't know if that really made the difference in the election. I'm not sure. But I do know their plan was to steal this election based on this massive mail-in vote, which, by the way, we have for 20 years been warned against. For 20 years, people wiser than us have said, Justice Souter, President Carter, Secretary Baker, Columbia University. You read reports on what is the most dangerous form of voting? What form of voting can be manipulated, and where can you carry out fraud the most? And it's mail-in ballots. And we were stupid enough to go to mail-in ballots.
All right, Representative Lefebvre.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attorney Jenna Ellis, Mayor Giuliani, all of the witnesses, committee members, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate everybody coming today. I think this was helpful. I've personally got a lot of things that are troubling as well. But my only question for this last witness is what specifically do you want us to do? Is it you're coming here today and saying that based on all of these concerning issues, you want the State House and Senate of Michigan to hand the president of the 16 electoral votes for Michigan? Is that what your ask is today?
No, I didn't ask that. I asked that you hold, that you take back your power under Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the Constitution, that you take back that power and that you spend the time, not just to listen to, you shouldn't decide anything based on what I gave you. It's just a sample. It's just a sample of things. There's a plethora of evidence that you can go through that will convince you that this election was stolen. I would ask you to go through that. Don't let it just get taken from us, and then we'll find out a year from now what the real plot was. And take a look, to some extent, at what happened in other states, because the fact that it's so similar in other states gives you a sense that what we're dealing with here was a plan, not just an accidental, oh gosh, Detroit stole an election, or Chicago stole an election, or New York stole an election. But I think you have a responsibility to go into session, take back look, the people who certified your election, what are they worth? Yeah, I wouldn't have put my name on that piece of paper. Not worth any of it. The piece of paper's a lie. We all know it's a lie. We know the figures there aren't correct. They're such wonderful public servants, they put their name on a lie. Why don't you spend the time to find out what the right numbers should be?
I guess, Mr. Mayor, my problem is we have these certifiers who I think, and maybe I'm wrong, but at least in one particular example, they didn't feel confident. They certified the vote. And now you're asked, the legislature is to take, and if I'm wrong again, tell me, to take evidence that and put my name to it and say that this is definitely what happened. This is that somebody won. I assume it wasn't Kanye West. I don't know, but to figure it out, and you want us to make the decision and then put our stamp of approval on it.
No,
Is
I
that
don't
what
want
you're
you to do it. The Constitution of the United States says you should do it.
All right.
I don't want you to
That's
do it.
Please, let's
Read the
stop.
Federalist Papers. It was given to you as the ultimate plenary power because you're the body closest to the people, and therefore the body that they believe could be most trusted to protect the people,
Thank you, Mr.
not the bureaucrats who made that decision.
Thank you.
Representative C.A. Johnson, are you willing
I
to
have
make a
quick
question?
question.
Sure.
Very quick. Mr. Giuliani. Hi again.
Hello?
Do you think that both you and the president are honest men?
Do I really have to answer that question?
Yes.
Representative C.A. Johnson,
Why
Representative,
not answer it?
Representative, do you have a point of order?
I'm asking the question.
Representative, we're
I'm
not gonna.
asking the question.
We
Are,
need a
do you
question related
consider
to the
yourself,
election.
Mr.
Representative,
Giuliani?
Representative, you're out of order, out of order. Representative, you're out of order. Representative, if you want to ask a question about the election, you can ask the question. But that is not about the election. So do you have a question about the election, Representative?
I can't because this is a show. No, I just can't.
Representative, do you have a, hold on, Representative. Representative, do you have a question about the election? All right, then I'll turn your mic on. Ask the question about the
Mr.
election.
Giuliani. Oh, did you turn it off?
If you have a question
Giuliani.
about the election, ask it.
I can hear you.
Mr. Giuliani. Do you believe that the citizens of Detroit, those who have voted, feel like what you're doing today is disenfranchising or attempting to disenfranchise the citizens of Detroit?
Just the opposite. I would say that trying
Let's
to
let him
separate
answer.
the honest from the dishonest vote is saving the franchise because every dishonest vote deprives an honest person of their vote.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
Let's let
And
him,
so-
Representative, let's let him answer the question.
Yeah, he just did.
Okay, then.
Yeah,
I think-
he just did.
oh,
And
then-
so I agree with you. Dishonesty is dishonesty, right? Right.
Thank you, Representative. All right, Mr. Giuliani, I think that's the questions for you. I know Jenna Ellis asked to say something. I'm not sure what, but what is it you wanted to say? You have some kind of closing statement?
Thank you. And I appreciate all of the members of the panel. And typically what I've done before 2 other states is to explain the Constitution and to explain your duty. However, in this particular legislature, it's very apparent that the circus has only been from one side. The witnesses that have appeared before you today have done so as honest, sincere, and forthright citizens bringing concerns to you. And when you are saying that there are concerns, but only looking forward, you're not doing your constitutionally obligated and mandated duty. And what we're here to do today is to present to you the evidence that we've been able to do in the last 4 hours. Mayor Giuliani is very correct that this is only a sample, but no honest person can hear these citizens of your own state today look at what happened in Wayne County with the bullying of the 2 GOP Board of Canvassers when they didn't want to certify the election and can let this proceed. What the Constitution obligates you to do is to take back your plenary power because the certification was false, clearly. And you can do that, and you should do that because you have an obligation as state legislators. Now, normally when I've testified in front of state legislators, it's about policy and it's about legislation. This isn't about policy. It's not about politics. It's not about Democrat versus Republican. It's not even about President Trump versus Joe Biden. This is about election integrity. This is about making sure that the people of the state of Michigan are not disenfranchised based on fraud and corruption. That's the reason that we are here. And I asked you the very beginning to put aside your party and your preconceptions to listen honestly to the people who've appeared before you. Now, I've been a part of many court trials, and you as the finders, of course, can determine and assess their credibility. They have sworn affidavits that they all indicated to you they swore under penalty of perjury. That's actually a very big deal for a citizen to come forward and do that. They're doing this because they're patriots and because America cannot function and exist without free and fair elections. Our founders understood that, and that's why they obligated you to be the last guardians of that process. What we're asking you to do is not something that is unheard of. It's not even something that hasn't been contemplated by our United States Supreme Court, which held in that 1892 case that was then cited favorably in Bush v. Gore, that this is your plenary, meaning absolute power. And if you, after an investigation, find that you want to certify the results, that is your prerogative. What we asked initially in the filing of our lawsuits, which, Representative, there were only 3 initially. It's not true that there were 39. And we would appreciate the facts being straight.
There are 39.
We
thank you.
have
Hey,
not from the Trump
Representative, let's continue.
not from the Trump campaign. And other concerned parties have certainly brought forward lawsuits for election integrity on their own. And we may have similar interests, but the campaign doesn't represent their lawsuits. But what we asked initially was to simply stop the certification because we had significant, not just concern, but actual evidence. And what you've heard today is not just a speculation, it's not just concern, it's not a conspiracy theory. It's people who were there, who were eyewitnesses, who were telling you what they saw. This was election officials who have violated the laws of your state that you as the General Assembly passed in order to preserve election integrity. There are 2 different tracks. You have the laws of the state that election officials on the ground are supposed to adhere to, and then you have the issue with dominion. Now, absolutely, the mayor is right that you need to audit those machines, but you have more than enough just based on the election official. Absolute fraud, absolutely ignoring the laws of this General Assembly, the laws of your state, to reclaim your authority. That is your duty. It's your constitutional obligation. And that's why we are in front of you. So I'm happy to answer any questions on the constitutionality, on anything, but I would simply urge you that this is not about policy. It's not about politics. It's not about Democrats versus Republicans. This is about making sure that we are not the generation that is the weakest link in America that does not preserve and protect our free and fair elections and our right to select our commander in chief into the next generation. That's what this is about. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions? Questions down here for Representative C.A. Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you so much for being here. And I agree with you too. It should be about us electing our own elected officials. And wouldn't you agree that we have elected our own elected official? And are you saying that some of us should not, our votes don't count?
Not at all, Madam Representative. The point is that when so much fraud dilutes the vote of the people that you serve and your constituents, then it's irredeemably compromised. And you may like the outcome of this fraud, but imagine if there were witnesses that were testifying to the exact same thing and the outcome had been for President Trump. The point here is that corruption is corruption and it dilutes the vote, and that cannot stand. And so, no, your state has not actually selected anyone for president. I mean, in fact, the representative said Kanye, maybe he doesn't know. I think that's where everyone is at, where we don't know. And what we do know is that there has been a massive amount of fraud, irregularities, and
Thank you.
I'm still finishing. Thank you. There have been massive amount of irregularities. There have been ignorance and complete disregard for the law of the state of Michigan. And so when it is so irredeemably compromised, when you have something like what happened in Wayne County, you have the intimidation of officials who are trying to do the right thing, intimidation even here in this committee of witnesses. That is unacceptable, and you should reclaim your constitutionally obligated authority so that you can make sure that the person that you send your delegates for genuinely reflects your constituency. And I hope that your constituency would demand and require that of you.
All right, thank you. I don't see any other questions, so thank you for your testimony.
Very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, too. And appreciate everyone who testified here today. We're grateful for that. I know a lot of stories were told here today of brave people who came forward about what they experienced. Can we wait until after the hearing's over, please, people? So we've heard a lot of brave people give stories today that, you know, are difficult for them to tell. And so we're grateful for that. And it's important to listen. It's important to listen to these stories. It's important to allow people to present what they've heard and what they've seen. And we've allowed clerks to testify here, and there'll be more people who testify on other days too. But everyone should be heard, and people shouldn't be heard and bullied. There shouldn't be bullying going on. I thought this was important to bring the mayor here to hear his story, to hear the story of all these people across Michigan who have these stories of fraud. And we had to cut some of them off because it went long. But I'll also say, I did think it was important to have a hearing with Republicans and Democrats where we could have debate, and tough questions should be asked and could be asked. I will note, though, that I was disappointed today because I felt that, you know, there were opportunities to ask good questions, and those were not taken. Instead, we heard a lot of interjections, a lot of attacks, a lot of just partisan rhetoric, and I was disappointed about that today. And I apologize to those witnesses who had to deal with that. That wasn't fair. But ultimately, I appreciate everyone going through that and telling their story. We wanted both sides to be heard, and you know, I'm disappointed. I feel like we need Dominion to come in and testify in order to know more about this system, and we'll continue to work toward that because we have a lot of questions for them. So with that, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Thank you, Jenna, and thank you to all the witnesses today. So with that, seeing no further business before the committee will stand adjourned.
All right, everyone, I want to thank you for joining us tonight on Right Side Broadcast.
Okay, everyone. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this segment of Black Spring with Autumn. And I just want to say thank you guys for all that you do. And I don't know, just a mini debrief, if you will. So I don't know. What do you guys think? What did we see there? What went well other than the striking of the gavel and I think the most prevalent argument was for the Constitution and the actual integrity of an election. If we're going to remain, if we're going to keep up the image or the framework that we are a constitutional republic, it's getting harder and harder to hear that. Now that's my assertion. It's getting harder and harder to hear when we clearly have an unconstrained majority. Not majority, but we seem to be, this ruling class just seems to they want to run the roost And it doesn't really matter. As long as they get the outcome that they want, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. And it's always, it seems to be, they've got these activists. So many activists are sitting in these assemblies and on these, even on the bench. You have got more activists. I mean, I think it's been like that for a while. I mean, it's in the education system. You have more activists in the education system. I'm going to share some comments here. Thank you so much, Old Head Deuce. See, I'm getting a little bit behind. Oops, that was not it. This is from John H. Roberts Jr., who says, why hasn't a forensic analysis of Dominion software been done? Because they're entanglements, and this is why I talk about all of this is a violation. A lot of them, just about everything, just about most of these charges or these claims, the fact that they're even using software or from these seedy companies or the machinery, it goes back to foreign entanglements and the kickbacks. So we can't clean. I don't know why. Is it possible to clean corruption with corruption? Is that what we're doing? I'm just asking, You can't. I mean, and I'm just thinking that, I mean, the countenance and the posturing of the people that are serving in our government, it's staggering. We are we're not in a good place. We're absolutely not in a good place. I mean, yeah, I mean, you see a total breakdown, a total change. And I mean, this is my thing. If it is, the thing about it is as I'm paraphrasing, they think they're benefiting. If they think that they're winning from that's all they care. The means, the end is all they want. The end game is all they want. And I really don't know. I mean, I don't know who's electing some of these people for the. I mean, can you believe that assemblywoman Johnson? Yikes! I mean, and then it's just I'm not sure. I'm just not sure. I just think it's a pit. I just think the government has turned into a pit, and yeah, you don't have to have any evidence, and they don't want to see any. You got to turn a blind eye and pretend like you're healing, and that's another word that you keep. That's the buzzword that you keep hearing. Oh, I want to heal the nation, and I just this figurative language is so disingenuous at this point. We got to get to you can't heal anybody without truth. You can't get to the core. You can't get to the root of a problem. We know what the symptoms are, but we can't quite seem to get to we can't treat the disease. And to me, that is corruption. I don't know why. I don't think it's unpatriotic to call out corruption. I think we have a high tolerance. We've tolerated these behaviors and the people and the ignorance. So I thank you guys so much. I'm going to give a little word to our sponsors, and I will go through and thank everyone. So, it's political theater, it's fun. It can be fun. So once again, I thank you guys so much, and we'll just have just a little bit of a thanks to our sponsors. Thanks so much, guys. This show is brought to you in part by our sponsors, Whether you're interested in health, culture, politics, scripture, automobiles, entertainment, history, and much, much more, there's something for everyone. So please check out Derek C. Williams, Killer Whale Channels, The Definition of Anarchy, Joseph Francis Burton, Chrysler Imperial H, Little Miss Goth, AZ Infidel, Cold War Jesus, Anthony Scioli, and Let the Truth Be Told. We'll be right back to the news right after this. All right. I thank you guys so much once again for coming in. And I want to read, I won't read so many comments here. But I will. I see a couple here. John H. Roberts says, why was Rep. Johnson so angry about people's testimony? Well, you got me, she was ready to, she's totally on the character attack, so many people throwing stones and attacking other people on integrity, right? Integrity, right? That she has so much integrity carrying on like that. I'm not sure the chair of the committee was swinging the gavel on her the majority of the time. She basically yielded all of her time to the gavel. Gavel C. Johnson. She's got a little reputation there. Just totally the body language. Like you're in no man's land. Total activist. Yeah, I'm just saying, this is the kind of professor your kid's gonna get. Yikes. But I thank you guys so much for all that you do. So I'm going to give a shout out to everybody for coming in. I really appreciate it. Occasionally we watch these things, but I think it was entertaining. It was paradoxical. We learned a few things, and they always bring in that voice they bring in the voice of reasoning, I guess, at the end. Let's see. So I want to give a warm shout out to Joseph Francis Burton. Thank you so much for all that you do and all of your support here on Black Spring. Thank you so much, Melinda Ann Burns, for coming out. Old Head Deuce, thank you so much for all that you do. Appreciate you. John H. Roberts Jr., thank you so much for coming in. And yes, I do support forensic analysis and signature reconciliation. And let's see, we have also, I know Chrysler Imperial H, if you're out there, Chrysler, thank you so much for all you do and all your support for the channel, Chrysler Imperial H. It's nice to have you. Poor Mom Life, thank you so much for coming in. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you guys so much also for taking care with the channelytics. I really appreciate that. And let's see, I think I'm going to miss Angela Reed. Thank you so much, Angela Reed, for coming in. I really appreciate it. It's nice, just bring your popcorn the next time. Sometimes when I do the flash streams, it's good to have the popcorn on hand, even if it's a bite size or like a share size or whatever. Carry the popcorn, I think, for the next, the next 60 days, or I guess, or roughly or so. I don't know how many days we are. I don't know. Always something going on here. Let's see. The thing about it is, I would think that the conservatives or the Republicans would be out of, okay, it's not enough to humiliate people and it's to humiliate or expose people. Is that all we do? Is that the, what we want them to face justice, but then we also want there to be the right correction, or that we want the next step. It's not just about them having egg on their face, which I don't think their face would hold any egg, but I just think that we're just not getting we're not getting it's not effective. Okay, I think there's some obsolescence here. I always want to be saved from obsolescence. I do, and be effective and be heard. And a comment here from Melinda Ann Burns. She says, do any of these council people even really know the Constitution? I would think it's fair to say if they know any part of it, I'm not sure how well they know it. I'm not confident that they're, I think they don't really regard the document. I think they just think of it as, oh, that thing in the corner, I think it would be even better. Do they even have a copy of it? She says, I hate it when they regulate these truths to quote stories like they are all tall tales. It's just disgusting. Yes, they are very much, I don't know, the feelings, it's all emotion. They all want to use their emotion to get them out of, to use their emotion, or to tell somebody else what should be. It's all subjective. So with that said, I think, let's see, we have a comment here that I missed. I really appreciate you guys so much. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and fold it up and pack it in. And I want to thank you guys so much for joining me on this segment of Black Spring with Autumn. Thanks so much. It was a treat to have you guys here. I'm thankful as always. And you guys have a great rest of your Wednesday. I believe it is. It's Wednesday evening. And I'll see you in the next live stream, in the comment section, in a video, or on another flash stream. Thanks so much, guys.